Life in a medieval castle. When we hear the words medieval castle, the imagination immediately paints tall towers surrounded by moats, knights in shining armor, and ladies in long dresses. We hear the clash of swords and the calls of trumpeters, while behind the thick stone walls, torches burn, illuminating endless corridors. Yet behind this romantic image lay a complex, often harsh, but fascinating life, where politics, warfare, economy, culture, and daily routine were woven together. A castle was never just the home of a nobleman. It was a symbol of power, a fortress, an administrative hub, and at times a small town in itself, housing dozens or even hundreds of people. Its walls could serve as refuge for local peasants during wartime, and its towers reminded everyone, here rules the one who can protect and command. The castle as a symbol of the age. The first stone castles began to appear in Europe around the 10th to 11th centuries, though wooden fortresses and fortified estates existed earlier. They were born as a direct response to instability and constant wars. In the feudal era, the king's power rarely extended far beyond his capital. Every lord or baron was, in effect, a small ruler on his land. To maintain authority, he needed a fortress that was both his residence, his stronghold, and his local seat of government. Castles were never built randomly. Their locations were chosen carefully, on hills, riverbanks, and crossroads of trade routes. Thus, the castle became not only a military stronghold, but also a visible sign of who controlled the surrounding lands. The inhabitants of a castle. The residents of a castle could be divided into several layers. At the top was the lord, the feudal noble who received land from the king or seized it himself. His family lived in the upper chambers of the keep, or donjon, the central tower of the castle. These rooms were relatively spacious and warm, decorated with tapestries, carpets, and wooden furniture. Around the lord lived his attendants and close servants, chambermaids, stewards, squires, cooks, musicians. On the lower levels or in adjacent wings were workshops, pantries, and storerooms. In the cellars were grain reserves, barrels of wine and ale, and sometimes dungeons for prisoners. Yet the castle extended beyond its walls. Around it grew settlements of craftsmen, blacksmiths, leather workers, weavers, and traders. The castle became the center of an entire miniature world. Everyday life. The castle day began at dawn. Servants lit fireplaces, prepared breakfast, polished weapons, and saddled horses. In the large courtyard, knights and squires trained in horsemanship, fencing, and archery. Training was not mere entertainment. It was vital preparation for war, since every lord was obliged to provide warriors for defense and for the service of his king. Women in the castle were not limited to embroidery or weaving. Wives and daughters of lords managed the household, oversaw servants, and kept track of supplies. In the absence of the master, a lady could in fact rule the entire castle. While literature often portrays ladies as dreamy figures waiting by windows, in reality, they were pragmatic, active, and strong-willed individuals. Servants and commoners lived far more modestly. Their diet consisted mainly of bread, porridge, vegetables, and the occasional piece of meat. Unlike the nobility, they rarely tasted sweets or exotic products. Yet it was their labor that kept the castle functioning. Feasts and celebrations. Despite a harsh routine, life in a castle could be joyful. The brightest events were the great feasts in the main hall. On holidays, long tables were draped with cloth, torches were lit, and platters of roasted meat, game, pies, and bread were brought out. Musicians played lutes and bagpipes, jesters entertained guests, and bards recited ballads of noble knights. But a feast was more than fun. It was a political act. At the table, alliances were forged, marriages arranged, and negotiations held. A generous and splendid banquet showcased the wealth and power of the host. Castles at war. Yet the primary purpose of a castle remained military. Enemies rarely attempted a direct assault. The walls were too strong. Instead, they resorted to sieges. Armies surrounded the fortress, cut off supplies, and waited until defenders starved. To withstand a long siege, castles were equipped with wells, cisterns for water, and grain and salt reserves. Some even had secret underground tunnels leading beyond the walls. Life during a siege was grueling. Every day could end with an attack. Women and children hid in the keep. Men guarded the walls. Outside, enemies built catapults, trebuchets, and battering rams. Some sieges lasted for months and ended either in surrender or in miraculous survival. Faith and symbols. Religion was inseparable from castle life. Almost every castle had its chapel, sometimes even a full church. The day often began with prayer, and important affairs were accompanied by blessings from priests. Holy relics, crosses, icons, or saintly remains were kept with great reverence. Castles were adorned with coats of arms and banners. Each noble family had its own emblem displayed on shields, gates, and towers. These symbols spoke louder than words, proclaiming ownership, lineage, and reputation. Who came to live in castles? A castle was not just a noble's home. It attracted a wide array of people: knights, vassals, priests, traders, craftsmen. For peasants, the castle was both a symbol of protection and a reminder of authority, sometimes harsh. Service in a castle could offer social mobility. A squire might become a knight, a musician a famous bard, a chaplain an influential advisor. Yet for most, life remained laborious and bound by duty. The story of one castle. Among the countless castles of Europe, one tale stands out, that of Castle Warneck in Normandy. The name is symbolic here. According to legend, during a siege in the 13th century, when supplies ran low and famine threatened, the lady of the castle, Lady Isolde, devised a clever trick. She ordered their last cow to be fed with the remaining grain. Then she led the animal onto the walls and showed it to the besieging army. "Look, we have so much food we feed it to cattle." The enemy, believing the castle could last indefinitely, lifted the siege. This act of wit and courage passed into legend. Romance and myth. Over time, the image of castles became enshrined in myths. In novels and films, they are depicted as places of love, betrayal, secret passages, and ghosts. We imagine knights in shining armor and ladies in silk gowns, though the reality was far harsher. Legends of ghosts, for example, often cling to castles. Nearly every region has stories of a white lady or the spirit of a warrior roaming the halls. These tales perhaps reflect collective memory of those who perished in battles and sieges. The legacy of castles. Today, many castles lie in ruins or have been turned into museums, yet they remain enduring symbols of the Middle Ages. Their walls tell stories of the past, of how people lived in the time of feudal lords, knights, and crusades. Visiting a castle allows one to travel back in imagination, to hear the clash of swords, smell the smoke of torches, and envision the clamor of a feast hall. The castle was never just stone walls. It was the mirror of its age, a world where authority rested on force. Faith guided daily life, and existence blended relentless struggle with fleeting joy.
Subscribe to me so you don't miss out on new stories.